Reddit, what is the most eerie thing that's ever happened to you? Story 1. I'm a medic and firefighter. We once had a call for something normal, like chest pain or something, I can't remember. The caller said he was in his barn/garage, which isn't weird really around here. Anyway, we pull up on scene and something just felt off. No idea why, but something just told me in my gut that something was wrong. I decided to do a 360 around the building before we went through the door at the front that was clearly the entrance. I walk around and come to a window on the side of the building and look in. There was a shotgun rigged to the door. The guy had set a booby trap for us. And he had hung himself as well. We kicked in this plexiglass-type material on the side of the building and entered that way. Guy was dead. Nothing we could do about it at that point. I would have been the first through that door. No idea why I didn't just walk through it that day. I've posted this before, but I feel it's a decent story. Story 2. I had one of those dreams that you couldn't wake up from. I knew I was asleep and I was aware, but I couldn't wake up. I was absolutely terrified, thinking that I was stuck in like a coma or something. I had a gun with me for some reason, and as the terror of not being able to wake up grew, I for some reason had a thought and belief that if I killed myself in the dream I would die in real life, and that was a better alternative than being in a coma. So I brought the gun to my head and pulled the trigger. I physically felt pain in my temple and heard the shot. I woke up right afterwards. Story 3. This happened last year. I was having a recurring dream where I was in the woods at night. I noticed a campfire in the distance. Whoever was sitting at the fire notices me and yells out, "Hey! What are you doing out here?" and starts moving towards me until I wake up. Late last summer I decided to go out to the woods for a hike. Once I got out there, I needed to pee. I hopped off of the trail to get closer to the creek so I could take care of business and not worry about anyone walking up on me. As I approached the creek, I see a hidden shelter and a man setting up a campfire. When he noticed me, he said, "Hey! What are you doing out here?" Nothing else happened. I apologized and went on my way. It was the only time in my life that I had dreams of an event before it happened. I was pretty shook at the time. Story 4. I once met the same set of twins in the same day. One after the other. One at a library and then another at the mall. Story 5. One time my husband and I were lying in bed and the bottom drawer to his nightstand slammed shut. There was no logical explanation for why that happened, and we still don't understand to this day. Edited to add, I should clarify that we were both awake when this happened. We were just lying there reading and playing on our phones, and we both heard the drawer shut clear as day. My husband has a habit of keeping his lower drawer open, and we looked over and it was closed. Very weird. Story 6. When I was in middle school, I used to spend my free time playing on my Game Boy or listening to CDs in my room. It was a 3-family house, with each floor occupied by a different family. Most of my family, including my parents, sister, and I, lived on the top floor, while my grandma lived alone on the second floor. My grandma used to take care of my sister and me while my parents were at work. She would frequently walk up the stairs at least twice a day to check on us. She wore loud wooden slippers in the house, so we could always hear her walking around on her floor, and especially when she was coming up the stairs. One weekend while I was alone at home with my grandma, I was sitting on my bed playing my Game Boy when I heard my grandma's unmistakable footsteps coming up the stairs. I heard her walking down the hallway and stopping in front of my door. I heard her open her mouth as if she was about to say something, so I looked up to meet her gaze, but there was no one there. I felt startled and ran out of my room to check the hallway, kitchen, and stairs, but I couldn't find anyone else upstairs besides me. I found my grandma sitting downstairs on the couch watching television. Story 7. My ex and I lived in a remote part of northern Nevada. The house was literally in the middle of a field and our neighbors were far away. He worked nights and I never liked how dark and quiet it was. On a night he was working, I fell asleep and had a dream about him. In the dream, he was standing on the edge of a cliff, like the Grand Canyon, looking out at the view. I tried many times to get his attention but he wouldn't acknowledge me. He was just staring straight ahead. After ignoring me for a while, he abruptly turned to me and grabbed the outside of my arms firmly. His face looked panicked and he said, "Name, there's somebody in the house." Like the movies, my eyes shot open and I woke up with my blood running cold. I lay in bed silently, listening for any sound. I was even more terrified when the dog woke up almost immediately, started barking, and ran out his dog door, into the yard. What did he hear? I never saw or heard anything out of place. I couldn't see anything outside in the dark. The dog came back in and fell asleep. I stayed up the rest of the night, totally creeped out. Story 8. When I was 13 to 14 years old, some older boys threw rocks from a demolition site at me and my friend. One rock hit me in the face and knocked me down. I started bleeding profusely on the sidewalk and my friend was freaking out. We did not have cell phones since it was the 1990s and weren't near a payphone. An older man in his 50s or 60s stopped in a pickup truck and asked us to get in. My friend was like, "OMG," but I said, "No, let's get in, it's fine." This older man felt really trustworthy, but I didn't know why. My friend got in with me and he drove us straight to the hospital. The hospital took his name, my friend's, and mine when we got to the ER, and the man peaced out. I had problems from the injury for 2 to 3 years, but I'm fine now, other than a small dent in my skull. My mom told me I should look him up in the phone book and call to thank him. There was exactly one name that matched his. It was an unusual name. I called it. The woman who picked up told me he had died 6 months earlier, but his physical description matched what both my friend and I recalled. I was able to look up his obituary and the photo matched his appearance. It was definitely eerie, and to this day, I don't really have any explanation for it. Story 9. I was a manager of computer repair for a retailer a couple years ago. We had a client's computer in the back running various malware and virus scans. I was doing morning paperwork in the back near the computer. This PC had its screensaver on displaying random photos from the My Pictures folder, various family members, children's birthday parties, the usual stuff. Then from then of my eye, I swear to God I saw a picture of a woman from the shoulders up with her throat cut. As soon as I realized what I was making out, I directed my full attention and it was back to photos of a car show. As the day went on, I thought nothing of it and proceeded to continue my work until I was bringing another customer's PC to the back to work on, and again from my peripheral I could have sworn I saw a bloody body bound in a trunk of a car. At that moment I began to freak out. I grabbed one of my employees, explained to him the situation. We then sat for 10 minutes and watched this screensaver. It is against company policy to search through the client's personal files without absolute just cause. We then proceeded to see a photo, 2 bodies in a shallow grave out in the woods and another photo of a severed hand down in kitchen drawer. I then went and got the general manager and informed him of the situation and had him view this screensaver. We then felt that I would be in everyone's best interest to contact law enforcement. In about 15 minutes later, owner of the computer and another gentleman show up. I proceed to tell him that his computer is not ready and it will be a while. He then informs me that he was called there because someone reported there was some photographs of a grisly murder that we had found. I showed him his computer and then his partner then begins to laugh at him. Apparently he went against police policy and took some of his work home with him and had never noticed his work photos were being used as a screensaver. TLDR, a detective unknowingly brings me his computer filled with gory homicide pictures that get mixed in with his screensaver. I soil myself thinking I am dealing with a murder, call the cops, and the detective returns to investigate his own computer. Story 10. During a severe thunder/lightning storm one night, I was alone in the cathedral, high up in the loft above the nave practicing the large pipe organ for a forthcoming recital. The flashing lightning illuminated the stained glass around the pipes with such intensity that it made the biblical characters seem to jump out of the windows and remain suspended in mid-air all around me, as if they had somehow come to life. Story 11. Sleep paralysis. I've had 2 episodes in my life, but the first one will stick with me forever. My bed was in a corner of my room. My closet was in the opposite corner. No door on the closet, and it was stacked with a ton of junk, community storage for the household as I never used it. I wake up lying on my back, with the door in line of sight. I can see that it's full. But I can also see a hand slide out and grip the door frame. Pale and feminine. Followed by the slowly emerging frame of a very tall woman clad in a white, Victorian-era dress. She was almost pretty, aside from something in her face that wasn't quite right. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I remember being uneasy about it. For a while, probably about 15 minutes, she just stood there, talking to herself. I wasn't able to make out anything she said, but that's when the panic set in. I realized I couldn't move or speak, couldn't look away, and had no idea what was happening, as I felt fully awake. Then she stopped, looked me in the eye and smiled, and the corners of her mouth pulled back to her ears. Terrifying. She started to approach, and slowly opened her mouth so wide, her chin was touching where I'd estimate the bottom of her ribcage sat. It wasn't long before I could smell her rotten breath, and she began to crawl on top of me. The entire time, she was letting out this awful, multi-toned moan that sounded like 5 voices at once, all distorted. I could feel her weight resting on my chest. I couldn't breathe or scream as she inched closer. She put my entire head in her mouth, and I fully woke up when all I could see was darkness. I still get a bit panicky remembering that one. It felt so real. Story 12. Years ago, I worked the late shift at a hospital, 4 p.m., midnight. My nightly drive home led me through back roads of fields and woods which often had low-hanging fog, particularly in early spring. I lived in a small town that has a lot of Civil War history. Ghost stories were so popular that area historians would do moonlight ghost walks, where they searched for signs of restless spirits roaming the battlefield. The urban legend was that, in a war that pitted brother against brother, those soldiers who were killed by family became souls that were never at rest. I never bought into it, but one night under particularly dense fog did scare the ever-living crap out of me. At around 1 a.m., as I sped through curves and hills, I saw the outline of 2 figures walking along the side of the road. The closer I got, the more I slowed down as I didn't want to hit them or anything. By the time I passed them, I was going probably 10 miles per hour. First I noticed their weirdly shaped hats. Then, the buttons on their jackets glimmered in my headlights. I swear to God, there were 2 Civil War soldiers walking in the fog in the moonlight. I could not breathe. The taller one, thin and gangly, looked up at my car and put his hand towards me. I hit the gas so hard. My transmission could barely keep up. I sped off into the night and, when I finally caught my breath, screamed several expletives. As I rounded another curve, I saw a small car, a Geo Metro, pulled over with lights flashing. Its hood was up and steam was coming from the engine. A man in Civil War garb stood close by staring at it with his hands on his hips. Damn reenactors were in town for some event and had car problems. To this day I have no clue why they were out so late. About scared me to death. Story 13. I went to Tajikistan in 2019 to meet my new colleagues and learn the area I was to be working in. I was greeted by my employer and a few of my new colleagues at the airport, and they took me to an apartment complex where everyone was housed. Every building was dull and dusty on the outside. Upon entering I could see hallways with tile flooring and metal staircases leading to each apartment. The apartments had heavy metal doors. I couldn't decide if I felt safe because everything looked secure, or uneasy. Because why did everything need to be so secure? We walked up to the third floor and entered the door on that landing. As I walked in, I was shocked. The floor was covered in immaculately detailed rugs, beautiful wallpaper covered in sparkling gold, plum and emerald-colored designs, massive crystal chandeliers and beautiful antique furniture. It felt like I had just walked into an underground palace. There were 2 women that took my things, showed me to my room and offered me tea, cake and a variety of snacks. Everyone was so kind and welcoming. It was around 6 p.m. and the women had prepared dinner for everyone. I was the only female in the group of colleagues. We were ushered into the dining room that had a long table close to the floor and surrounded by big beautiful floor pillows. We ate, laughed and had good conversation. Come bedtime, one of the ladies brought towels and toiletries to my room and let me get settled in. She told me to lock my door, which I would have done regardless. The doors to the rooms were also a heavy metal door with large sliding locks on them. After I freshened up, I got into my pajamas and got into bed to call my husband. We talked for about an hour before I started falling asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with my phone in my hand. I could hear someone singing. I didn't understand the words, but it sounded sad. Made my hair stand up on end. It sounded far away. I got out of bed to look out the window. In the distance was a mountain range with faint lighting behind it, as if the moon was setting behind it. The singing was coming from the mountains. It was both beautiful and eerily terrifying. I lost track of time, not even sure how long I was standing at the window. I asked about it the next morning at breakfast and everyone just kind of looked at each other. Never gave me an explanation. They just said some things here are ancient. I'll never forget that experience. Story 14. I grew up in a 2-family house. Me, my parents and siblings living on one side, my grandmother on the other side. You're able to access my grandmother's side through a single door in the house. Once she passed away, I slowly took over her side since I was in high school and wanted my own space. One night I was walking to my room at the end of the hallway. There was a small mirror on the wall at the end. It was pretty dark, but I was still able to see. Right before I entered my room, I had looked up into the mirror and saw my grandmother standing behind me. So terrifying, since this was around 3 a.m. I had to leave the house and stay with my girlfriend. Story 15. I was over at my parents' house and watering their plants this winter when they were on vacation. I go to my car and put in the reverse, and this old man walking on the pavement, and I make eye contact. He smiles at me and I smile back. And then I am out on the way and putting in the forward and going to drive away, and I still look at this old man. But then when I look forward and start driving away, he is absolutely gone. I look in all the mirrors and turn my neck and he is nowhere to be seen. Just gone. Story 16. About 10 years ago. My wife and I were watching Paranormal Activity on TV. It was late at night. As soon as the final scene, terrifying, was over and the credits started rolling, we heard a large dog barking outside our front door. We lived in an isolated house in the country, had been in the house for years, and had never heard any dogs nearby. I ran upstairs and opened the door. No dog. Nothing. Dead quiet. My wife immediately swore off horror movies and hasn't watched one since. Story 17. I have quite a few, but one of the ones from my childhood was a night, I had to be 12 to 15, and was home alone. I was playing on the computer in our den, and directly across from it was the door that went up to the pantry, which had a set of stairs that led to the attic. Suddenly I heard a loud thump, then the repeated thumps as something fell down the stairs. My heart stopped because there was a door at the top of the stairs that shouldn't have allowed anything to do so. I remember getting up and walking over to the door but being unable to touch the knob. Then the sound of pacing started above me. Slowly walking backwards, I returned to the den and curled up in a ball on the couch, staring at that door as the sound of a thump followed by the sound of something following down the stairs happened again. This continued on for hours till shortly before my parents got home it stopped and never happened again. My dad went up after they got home and confirmed nothing was moved or anything, but I hated being alone so night after this. This was the same house. I wouldn't shower if nobody was home either though. It was just a bit odd. The one we moved into after this one was worse though. Story 18. When I was very young and first started wearing makeup, I stopped by a pharmacy before going home from making a school project with my peers at their house. I ordered a cab and stayed at the entrance of the store near the auto doors. A very old tall man came in and flirted with me. I froze and he towered over me. He grabbed my face. I think his grip really scared me back then. He said he'd be back and went inside. People walked past and nobody spoke up. When the taxi came I ran inside and cried. Story 19. This is so stupid now, but at 5 I woke up to the shadow of a figure in the door. That's Mom, I thought till I realized she was in bed next to me. This shadow does not move and just lingers, looking at us. I was horrified someone had come in. Terrified, I didn't move. The next morning I realized my mom had hung her bathrobe on my headboard post in a way the shadow hid it just so. Man, facepalming it so stupid, but that few minutes I just closed my eyes till I fell asleep. I was so scared. Story 20. A few years ago I was on holiday in Malta with my family. My parents are Maltese and I have a ton of cousins and family living there. One of my cousins' father had passed a few years before this and I'd known him fairly well. On this day while I was on holiday, we were just outside the walls of Valletta walking on a road and my wife and I started mentioning we needed to look for a way to cross. We were just walking normally and not standing on the edge of the road or making any sign that we wanted to cross. Suddenly a Mini Cooper appears out of nowhere, slams to a halt where I am, and the driver leans across and tells me not to cross the road where I am, that's too dangerous, and points to a spot where I should cross. Then he drives off. The driver was an exact resemblance of my cousin's father, wearing exactly the same clothes, shorts, white singlet, he used to habitually wear, and driving exactly the same car he used when alive, and the same color. The thing is, he spoke to me in English when the default should have been Maltese. It's like he knew I spoke English when there was nothing that would have marked me out as a foreigner. I can't explain how he knew that I was intending to cross the road, but am convinced he appeared to save me from getting hit.